So, Brendan, the show 13 Reasons Why really surprised a lot of people, not just fans of the book that it was obviously going to appeal to, but to just about everybody. Why do you think the show had such a broad appeal?
I feel like it hit a number of different, first off, ages. You know, it hit a lot of different demographics. I think it hit, obviously, there was the connection to the actual age of the characters themselves, you know? And then also, obviously, with Selena being tied to it, her whole fan base, which is actually a wide range too, but a lot of young folks. And then also even, I think with how Netflix is just connected to the social web right now, it's Netflix is like one of the main things that younger folks especially just link into to view stuff. You know, it's like a brand new thing. It's kind of crazy, you know, to think how YouTube was just only invented, was it 12 years ago or something? You know, it's a whole entire landscape has shifted. I think that also, along obviously with the storytelling, there's something for parents to get in it. You know, there's something for kids to get in it. There's something for, I'm not a parent yet or a kid, but I've been through high school. I remember how tough high school was, you know, and I genuinely resonated with it. And I have friends that have watched it and gotten in touch and everything. I feel like it just hit a lot of truths and a lot of things that everyone can find some piece of their own story in something about the show, you know?
So, I mean, when it came to you creating music for the piece, you say everyone could find something within it to relate to. What did you find in it that helped you create music for it?
I would say first off, I thought the casting in particular was rad. I think they did a really good job with that. So even just on that side of things, Clay and Hannah, I thought their actual performances were awesome, and I tapped into that for sure. On the high school side of things, I mean, I definitely remember, you know, I remember being bullied, and I remember bullying also, both, you know, as usually is the way some type of hierarchy happens that just kind of goes down the food chain, you know. I could relate to that. I could relate to, honestly, even now that I'm, you know, approaching parenting world, I could relate to that. I could relate to the idea of my parents having to deal with something like that, just in general, or how they were having to deal with me throughout high school in that time period. For me, I'd say one of the biggest connections, though, honestly, tapping into it was just the fact that it was written in a way that didn't shy away from what was happening to these characters, and the fact that it didn't sugarcoat or present the kids as just naive. You know, it presented them as just real people, and they were experiencing real stuff. And I think the fear of being vulnerable at that age frame was a big part of what inspired the music and inspired the way we went for it. And that kind of juxtaposition of like not wanting to be vulnerable, except needing to talk to people about what's happening. That's kind of what a huge part of what the story is about, you know?
Right. Now, had you read the book before you came on board this?
Nope, I hadn't actually heard of it or anything. When they sent the info for the series, I went and checked, and I saw, you know, that it had a huge fan base and that it was doing really well, and that people that were into it seemed to be very. There's a strong love for the book. You know, people really highly took it, thought of it in high regard, and took it really close to their hearts. You know. Mm-hmm. So that's the amount that I knew about it.
Right. So when it came to creating the various themes for this show, what were some of your ideas in terms of like expressing character or expressing the mystery? What were some of your thoughts?
I mean, there's so many different bigger things that happen throughout the series that I wanted to convey definitely the idea of innocence. So there's some innocence interweaved into a bunch of different themes, and you know, the kind of, you know, cliche or just in general the idea of losing innocence, And the idea of, you know, the kind of interplay between light and dark. And also there was a really fun opportunity to do the past and future type of thing, or past and present, you know, kind of playing with ethereal past stuff and then going into present, as well as sonically getting to play with super electronic elements, and then also getting to play with very organic things and kind of seeing how that might progress throughout the whole entire series.
Mm-hmm. And there's certainly a great deal of tragedy to this story, given the subject matter. How did you express that?
To be completely honest, I was intimidated at the idea of first taking it on, knowing where some of the storyline would be going. Because this is my second show. The other one that I'm doing right now is Billions. And I have never scored for something like this. You know, I've never been in the position to write music for scenes that are that real and raw and tough, you know. So at first I was intimidated, but by the time that I was already at those really tough moments in the series, I was already so heavily invested in the characters and in the writing and in the story overall, that it just came from a place of wanting to have it feel honest, you know, have it feel, you know, like we were talking about before, kind of placing myself back then and knowing the tough things that can happen at that age range, and then just trying to convey that, also while putting out this, like, something that's really sensitive, but then also a lot of stuff happening on the inside, you know. I feel like there's a few pieces that I ended up writing for the soundtrack in particular that really touch on the inner world, you know, like Clay's piece. That's all about something that's happening to him on the inside, you know. And so I feel like I tried to attack that in a few different ways.
You mentioned this being your second show, and I mean, Billions could not be more different from what you do here. But I wonder, did you learn anything doing that show that helped you in your work on this one?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even just logistically, even just the most basic stuff as just being able to create material for this other show. Oops, sorry, I'm gonna have to move this guy slightly.
Oh, no problem.
Sure, this guy's getting proper air.
Yeah.
Otherwise, the fan is gonna start going crazy. So even just logistically, even just the idea of, so my background is doing albums and touring and that kind of world, and Billions was the first time of diving into the world of, you know, every 2 weeks a new episode was happening, and 13 Reasons Why was every 1 week. So even at the most basic level of, when it comes to creating music, of getting out of my own way, that was a huge thing I learned. You know, and it's happened with both shows. I would say that, you know, when you're working on an album, you can spend 7 hours just working on a hi-hat, you know, and you can't really do that when you have an episode due each week, you know. So the idea of getting out of the way and allowing the strongest themes to come out and allow them to do their thing was huge. I learned a lot that it's okay to kind of roll with the flow. So sometimes I think the scope of the project, if I thought about the whole entire thing at once, it would seem a bit daunting. And where might I go, and who knows what's going to happen, and, you know, how am I going to build these themes out and stuff. And instead of that, just really focusing on each episode at a time and creating little ideas, motifs that were flexible enough that I know I could shift them into different ways later. So it was just an opportunity to do that, keep it minimal and but still heartfelt, you know. Right.
Was it always the goal to become a composer for TV or perhaps film as well?
No, I'm super visual. I have a bit of synesthesia. So even just through my own music, I've always been super visual. And part of the motivation to move to LA, I was in San Francisco for 5 years before this. And I'm from Connecticut originally. Part of the motivation to come down to LA was definitely the idea of films. I actually hadn't even really thought about TV, but even since I moved down here 6 years ago, even that landscape's changed a bit, you know. But I feel like it feels very natural to me, for sure.
You're working with a great team on this show. Brian Yorkey, the creator and showrunner, Tom McCarthy, one of the directors, Carl Franklin, and so many others. What did they give you that helped you in your work?
I mean, most of my communication was with Brian. So he was the day in, day out, every episode, every week. And so our first meeting was just the overall general musical landscape, just the general sense of how he was wanting to kind of merge a few different generations and a few different aesthetics from those generations, and also being mindful and conscious of the tracks that were being used for the licensing, you know, Joy Division and other things like that, of a nod towards that era, and then also being able to fit it in with current stuff and some of the things that I'm doing. So with Brian, it was a lot of really wanting to make sure that, you know, I would sketch something up, and we really focused creating the world basically in the first 2 episodes, you know, kind of just getting a general sense of what this world was going to embody. And a few of the first things that I made right at the very, very beginning were the tape theme, and then something for Hannah. And that kind of just acted as a launching point to kind of guide us in a few directions. Like I created some things that were kind of electronic-y and churning and kind of darker. And there are other ones that had a bit more of a lighter, for lack of a better term, kind of twinkly, lighter, floaty, ethereal stuff. And it was just a lot of back and forth dialogue with Brian, and we kind of just went from there.
Mm-hmm. Now, we know there's going to be a second season. Are you going to be a part of that, or do you know yet?
I believe so.
Have you gotten any indication of what it's going to be about, or can you not say?
Oh, I don't even think I could say, but I also have no idea. Based on some of the openings in the first season, you know, I know there was obviously with Tyler in terms of the guns. I feel like that could be an angle, which would obviously be a huge and also tough topic to engage with, you know, but I feel like it would be right in line with it. I know the investigations were still happening. That was like barely just starting. And yeah, I know there's a few openings. I have no idea though.
Lots of it.
Brian's writing and Brian's previous work even before this, you know, whatever he comes up with, I know it's going to be good.
Lots of interesting possibilities to explore. You know, the show, it has such a tough subject matter, being about teen suicide. I wonder what you hope people take away from the show when they see it.
Well, I know one of the intentions for Brian and for the team was just to instigate dialogue. You know, I know that was a huge part of it, of instigating dialogue in a way that was authentic and uncomfortable and real for families. And so musically, like I'd mentioned before about trying to merge generations of music. Mm-hmm. The idea of doing that. Sorry, my cat just jumped up here. Also doing that in terms of the dialogue. You know, he really wanted and wants people from different generations to talk about this, and for it to also instigate communication between friends to talk about this. And I know for myself that was a huge part of wanting to take this on. I love the fact that it was coming from a female's point of view. I love the fact that it, like I mentioned before, it didn't sugarcoat things, and it didn't treat the kids as being naive. And I know with anything like this, especially in this environment that we're in, a lot of different opinions would be out there. At the very least, I know that engaging people in dialogue about this type of thing, that's very much happening. You know, kids are dealing with this type of stuff. It's not going away if you don't talk about it. It's not going away if you don't face it. And at the very least, hoping that I could bring some type of help to just to the story and to the writing, you know, just by bringing some sound into it.
Well, Brendan, thank you so much, and congratulations on your work. It was a pleasure talking with you.
Awesome. Thank you, sir. Cheers.
You're welcome. Have a good one.